And for everyone joining us on Zoom, thank you for taking part in this event today. We have quite a crowd here at the Archaeology Museum here in sunny Los Angeles. Hello, everyone. My name is Carla Garapedyan, and I would like to welcome you to Reconnecting with Western Armenia, a symposium in honor of Armen Aroyan. Tonight, we are on a journey to celebrate the many journeys that Armen Aroyan has led. It's a celebration by some of the people who've been inspired by them. We have a fantastic team of speakers who will address the impact made by Armen Aroyan on a specific group of scholars and researchers who stand in for an even larger group of scholars and researchers. Before we start, I want to mention the co-sponsors of this event: NASR, the National Association for Armenian Studies and Research, the Archaeology Museum and Research Center, where we are assembled now, the UCLA Promise Armenian Institute, the USC Dornsife Institute of Armenian Studies, and the UCLA Nadagatsi Chair in Armenian Studies. Quite a group, and to all of them, I say thank you very much for your support. And briefly about the Archaeology Museum and Research Center, it aims to share the rich history, culture, and heritage of the Armenian people through preservation and education. The museum implements its mission through the display of artworks and cultural artifacts, research archives, and annual educational programming that presents interpretive exhibitions, literary events, musical programs, and public lectures. And a few more words about NASR, who actually spearheaded this event. NASR, the National Association for Armenian Studies and Research, it was founded in 1955 as a pioneer in the field of Armenian studies. It established the first two endowed chairs in Armenian studies at Harvard University and UCLA. Since then, it has supported scholars, institutions, and the general public in a wide range of activities promoting Armenian studies. NASR provides grants to scholars. It co-sponsors academic conferences. It develops an active series of programs to bring the work of scholars to the general public. It maintains a major research library and manages an extensive bookstore. And in recent years, NASR organized 4 trips to historic Armenia with Armen Aroyan and historian guides George Barnutian and the late Richard Hovhannisyan. As an independent nonprofit organization, NASR relies on the support of its members and donors. So we thank you for supporting its mission. This particular event is part of the NASR Kalos Gulbenkian Foundation lecture series on contemporary Armenian studies, which covers post-World War II era Armenian subjects. And to be sure, the re-engagement of diasporan Armenians with their ancestral homeland is very much a contemporary topic, and one that continues to be explored in various ways by scholars, artists, and filmmakers, writers, and members of the community. Now, just as a straw poll, how many of you here have been on one of Armen Aroyan's trips? Raise your hand. Oh my goodness. For those of you who are watching from Zoom, we have a quorum, I can tell you that. As for me, I'm representing the Armenian Film Foundation, who's offering its own trips to Western Armenia this year, along with the Gomiras Institute in London. More on that later. So, let's begin our journey tonight with a brief focus on the man we are celebrating. Armen Aroyan was born in Cairo, Egypt, where he grew up and received his early education. He'd go on to study engineering, first at the University of Cairo, and then at Cal State Los Angeles, obtaining a BS and MA in electrical engineering there, as well as an MBA from USC. Now, Armen was an engineer by profession, but he found his true calling with his first expedition into the interior of Turkey in 1987. The destination, Aintab, his own ancestral region. This led to subsequent visits, and eventually, by the early 1990s, Armen created Armenian Heritage Tours. On these trips, Armen led groups of what he came to call his pilgrims, including a number of scholars and researchers who had the unique chance to connect with the lands of their ancestors or to see locations they had previously seen only in names in books. Over the next 27 years, there would be 100 more trips and close to 1,500 travelers or pilgrims. These journeys are richly documented in many articles that have appeared over the years in Armenian newspapers and other outlets. And they are comprehensively chronicled by Armen himself in a 4-volume collection, The Pilgrim Speaks, an Armenian discovery of ancestral roots. And you can check that out in the entrance of the museum here today. Although Armen Aroyan was not the first to lead travelers to reconnect with Western Armenia, nor is he the last, no individual has done more or even close to as much to reestablish contact between the descendants of Western Armenians and their ancestral homes. Although the impact Armen has made on these descendants has been commented on and celebrated over the years, somewhat less noted has been the significance for scholars and researchers, many of whom have had their work profoundly affected by journeying with Armen to Ani, or Meren, or Harpert, or Marash, and so many more places. So tonight, we're going to hear from some of these scholars and researchers, some of whom trace their roots to these lands, some of whom have developed deep ties to them, despite not being Armenian. We offer this evening as a tribute to Armen Aroyan for his immeasurable contributions, for his willingness literally always to go the extra mile, for his generosity of spirit, and for his inexhaustible zeal to lead his pilgrims to places they thought they would never see. We'd like to continue our journey with a short video by Ani Hovanesyan, showing one of Armen's trips to Meren.
40 plus 80.
So we're in no man's land here.
Yeah.
No.
The Ahuryan is separating Armenia and Turkey.
Okay, as soon as we go behind this mountain, you'll see Meren. As you can see, it's quite a distance.
We are in Meren. Meren?
Yes, 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 yes. No, 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 yes, no, no.
They're negotiating to get a tractor to get us from here to the church. Just sitting alone out there. I'm trying to see it with the camera.
I saw it. I'm just happy I saw it. I'm like, that's almost enough. I don't know if I could handle getting closer. There's too much excitement for me, but I need to get closer. But I wonder how Armen's doing. This is good light. It's good light to catch the details. And I have a whole list.
Oh, good.
See? 43 items. You guys could help. 41 items that I couldn't figure out from my work, that I needed to look at. So
How long have
Armen?
you been studying this church?
A long time. Is there any?
Yeah, we're working at it. Did you see Meren?
Yeah, I did. So I'm happy if we get there, but that I got this close was amazing too.
Okay, he just got the permission to go to Meren
And from whom did he get the
from the
permission?
gendarme.
They're cleaning out the hay and manure so that we go sit on it.
Dad.
Hey, good luck, good luck. Look at this. Bye-bye. This is a place that very few people have been in the last, 500 years or so?
Yeah, exactly. Good point.
Whoa.
Somebody gets hurt. Wow.
But what a vast land we had, it's just overwhelming. This beats my camel trip in Egypt. This beats the funicular ride on Tatakia Monastery in Armenia. As a matter of fact, I don't think I'll need another adventure for the rest of my life.
This is how we came.
Okay, I'm gonna cry later, but right now I have to take some pictures. Okay. So gotta get to work here. Church, where have you been all my life?
Just gotta experience how it is.
This is amazing. There's no crown on that figure. That's what I argued, and that is proving to be correct by close examination.
What is this, Christina?
I think that this is probably Emperor Heraclius returning the true cross to Jerusalem, and that's his horse.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
It's a compared to shot parts of it.
Shot part. Raman net. Onarga, osarga. Amin dis banrazen. Jamanagin fresco in arach agot kareren. Agot kareren.
Was this a room underneath?
It was a crypt.
It was the crypt.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Mason's marks bear that out. Yeah. Oh, is that it? It's the same picture you see on the coins. Same portrait. Wow, they really did fix it.
1,500-year history on this site. Armenian history. Look at this destruction. This is the seam.
I've been saying before, I'll take
It's
pictures
coming
now
apart,
before I
the
leave.
church. We don't know how much longer this will last.
This wall might fall, do you see?
Yeah. And there's Ararat.
Huge, beautiful, colorful. It's our cultural heritage, and it's still here. And that's why I come, to see what's left.
That is beautiful.
Thank you, Ani Hovhannisyan, for putting that video together for us. We're going to see and hear more from Ani later. For our first speaker for this presentation, coming from Scotland, live, is Steve Sim, who is a native of Scotland, and he has been described as one of the most traveled explorers of the historical Armenian lands in present-day Eastern Turkey, largely traveling on his own. He's recently been featured in the PBS documentary, The Hidden Map, with filmmaker Ani Hovhannisyan. Sim was an architectural student in Glasgow in the early 1980s when he first traveled to Turkey for the summer. On that first trip, he discovered a landscape of abandoned Armenian buildings, many regarded as architectural masterpieces. His first encounter led to a lifelong mission to chronicle the remaining sites and relics of historic Armenia. Sim traveled alone every year from Scotland to photograph the vanishing traces of Armenian history. He has taken more than 100,000 photographs of Armenian sites in Turkey, and he's the creator of Virtual Ani, a comprehensive online site dedicated to these many sites, including Ani. Hello, Stephen. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Well, the backstory to my first encounter with Armen dates back to 1993. That year, after making several trips to historical Armenia, I took a video camera with me, which I used to film my travels and later edited into a video diary type documentary titled A Journey Through Western Armenia. In 1995, I was invited by Misa Gohanian of the Centre for Armenian Information and Advice in London to show the video there. And because of the good reaction, I began to think about how to make it, remake the video to bring the subject to a wider audience. Higher quality digital video cameras were becoming available at that time. So I decided that repeating the journey with a group of Armenians to record their reactions and thoughts would be an interesting route to take. However, I quickly discovered that all of the I'd love to be able to go to Eastern Turkey feedback quickly turned into maybe I'll do it next year sort of excuses when faced with a real invite to go there. However, one of the people I met in London, Nuritsa Matosian, mentioned that part of the research she had been doing on a planned book on Archaeology had involved going on a tour to Eastern Turkey that had been organized by an Armenian named Armen Aroyan. Until that time, I'd never heard of him. So she gave me Armen's contact, and I remember faxing him in the spring of 1996, mentioning what I was planning to do and wanting help to find some US Armenians who might also want to participate. Armen did pass my name on to some others, and I did get some replies, but unfortunately they were all still the maybe next year sort. I, however, did keep in touch with Armen, and I met him for the first time in Turkey in Sivas in August 1997. I accompanied his group as they visited some of the formerly Armenian villages around Sivas, and later met up with them again a week later in cars and continued with them to Lake Van. On the back of that, in 1998, Armen invited me to join his June tour group in Turkey. I'm going to show some slides now of since my photographs of Armen start from 1998. Here's the photograph I mentioned. So on the left is Peter Cowie, Professor Peter Cowie, and in the middle is Archbishop Astian of New York. And on the right is Robert Hewson, Professor Robert Hewson, and the photographer is Ware Kacharian, who later went on to publish a book of photographs, mostly containing photographs taken during his trips with Armen. The book's called Yerkir. And the shadow at the bottom right is that of Kim Thero, who also wrote a book about Arshil Gorky. And that's the tour group at Ani. And here is the tour group at one of the monasteries on Mount Sepu. As I said, this is the most accessible one that you can visit. There are 3 main monasteries on Mount Sepu, and this is the most accessible, but even so, it still took about an hour and a half's walk to get there from the nearest road. And I remember having to cross rivers and wade across little streams and scramble over rocks to get there. And by the time I managed to get there first, and by the time it took about an hour for all of the participants to eventually gradually make their way up. And after 1998, I made a point of checking with Armen to join up with him if he was in Eastern Turkey. And over the years, all the various rituals, strange rituals, initially strange rituals like gathering soil or stones, or standing in front of street signs, and the various other things that the participants did. The various other interactions with the landscapes and with the buildings gradually became familiar and normal And of course, there was lots and lots of group photographs over the years. This is an Eintep in the Armenian, formerly the Armenian cathedral in Eintep, and this is outside one of the former Armenian houses. So Armen always continued to and wanted to continue to visit new sites. So in 2013, he was the first to visit Sur Bartholomeos Monastery near Van, just a month after it had been vacated by the Turkish army, who had occupied the site since the 1930s. His willingness to engage with the locals also led to many smaller discoveries like this one. These are Armenian seals found by a villager in a formerly Armenian village near Harput. But it's difficult to explore new places when you've got to have a tour group to take care of. You can't have 20 people walking an hour along a road that might be on the wrong path. And that I sometimes could help. So here I'm showing Armen the only intact pre-genocide era street in Van, which I discovered by chance just by walking around Van. Both these houses have since been demolished. And I also noticed nearby an Armenian gravestone embedded in a modern wall. I also suggested some better viewpoints for taking the photographs. This is on the smaller photograph. That was Armen's standard viewpoint for taking pictures of the group in front of Ararat, but it's on the road to Do Bayezid. But I knew that there was a better place on the other side of the pass on the road to Zor Caravanserai, and so then after 2011, that was where we took the pilgrims to if they wanted a photograph of Ararat in front of Ararat, which most of them did. I also suggested additional sites to visit, sometimes places I'd never been to, which could backfire if there was nothing. When we got there, I discovered there was little or nothing to see. Like here, for example, the group is walking to Arsamosata, which was the capital of one of the minor Armenian kingdoms that existed between Armenia proper and the territory of the Roman Empire. So it was maybe about a 40-minute walk from the stopping off point. And that's the mound that's almost all that's left of Arsamosata. Unfortunately, the main part of the city is now underwater, hidden by one of the many dams that exist in eastern Turkey. So I don't really know what the participants felt about the site or if they understood anything of its former significance. But in this, Armen was always willing to indulge me a little. So I recall in one year at Palu, after visiting the ruined church, the group got back into the bus to drive down to the main road. And I said I prefer to walk back down, and could they wait for a bit? But this is because I had noticed some stones on the hillside on the way up and wanted to investigate. So it turned out that it was the remains of the town's Armenian cemetery. So by the time I actually returned down to the minibus, the horn of the bus had been honking for a while, and the group was looking really visually impatient at me. But Armen just asked, had I found anything interesting? And a reply of yes was enough to satisfy him. So here is one of the gravestones I found. I don't know if it still exists. When I found it, it was broken into 3 parts. So I had to find the 3 parts and put them back together. So perhaps this photograph is the only record of its existence. And that's because Armen gave me the time to find it. What always struck me was the outward sense of the security and the effortlessness in Armen's tours, but in reality, a lot of hard-won experience, a lot of organizing, and a lot of day-to-day planning went into them. So here's Christina at Mren, as depicted in Annie's introductory video. But in the background, you can see Armen is on his phone, probably arranging where the group would eat that night, or perhaps confirming the following day's hotel booking. There were some things, though, that he didn't do very well. The picnics, for example. So the bottom right picnic is a group of Iranian Armenians who used to once a year go to the Lake Van area, and they had massive picnics. But on the left is Armen's picnic style of a picnic. It's just stopping at the side of a road and getting out into some derelict land and eating some sandwiches, which were bought in the nearest town. But apart from that, everything in Armen's groups were very lovely. And so my last meeting with Armen was in 2016. Armen was looking a bit older at that time, but the familiar ritual of visiting a mix of historical sites and ancestral villages continued. So this is Joyce Biven at Karakale, and she's probably thinking Karakale at last because she had been searching for it for several decades, and there are dozens of Karakales in the Kars region. But Armen found the right one, and it's definitely the right one because here's Armenian tombstones. So while trying to find participants for his tours, Armen probably came across as well many of the maybe next year excuses, but now no next year is possible. The hidden map territory, call it what you want, Western Armenia, historical Armenia, or even Eastern Turkey, but please don't call it Eastern Anatolia. That hidden map territory that we both explored, mostly separately, but sometimes together, seems much emptier and forgotten without Armen and his regular tour groups. Thank you.
And thank you, Stevenson, for that presentation and for staying up so late in Scotland. We appreciate it. And
yeah, it's 1:30, 12:30 at the moment. It says here.
If you don't mind staying up a bit later, you might just sort of listen along to some of the other speakers if we have time for questions.
I plan to. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. And our next speaker is with us here. It is Manuk Avedikian. Manuk is a project manager at the USC Dornsife Institute of Armenian Studies. He manages the California History Through Armenian Experiences Oral History Project, where he's been conducting life history interviews throughout the state of California. And if you've been interviewed for this project, you'll know just how extensive those interviews are. Manuk is involved with indexing, transcribing, and integrating the project's materials into USC Digital Library. He previously managed the Armenian Genocide Survivor Oral History Collections at the USC Shoah Foundation for over 7 years, which is where I met him. During his time at the Shoah Foundation, he personally worked on 500 survivor interviews and ultimately helped set the foundations for the first digital Armenian genocide archive. Manuk holds an MA in political science and international affairs from the American University of Armenia in Yerevan, focusing on non-Muslim minority issues and reforms in modern-day Turkey. He has a BA in history from California State University of Northridge. And Manuk will begin his presentation with a video.
We're going to show a few-minute video that the Institute put together a few years ago, and I think it's a good way to begin this segment.
I wrote Archaeolian 1915. Underneath it, I wrote Archael 2012.
Beautiful.
So my father was here, my aunt was here in 1915. I was here in 2012.
Maybe,
and,
maybe 2013 you'll have your brother.
I will have my brother here in 2013 and hopefully my daughters.
We are in Igdir Mava. Igdir Mava is an outskirt of the town of Igdir. It's the birthplace of Avedisa Aroyan, who was the representative of the Republic of Armenia to the Paris Peace Conference and who was the signator of the Treaty of Sevres. Avedisa Aroyan, Asuremen Iren, Tsananta Vairne. You have Arax, Ice.
You're on.
Monastery, and it's the most amazing place. And we have made a decision as a parish to come to church on September 3rd Sunday of September in honor of the feast of Baraka Sukupachiton. It's an amazing experience. And we thank you all for allowing us to be here, Armen for explaining it to us, and our other guide for giving us further in-depth information. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm very fortunate, or I feel very fortunate that I'm able to speak. And since I have some personal the connection, though I was not part of Armen Aroyan's visits or trips. But as you saw in this video, Armen Aroyan had donated his videotapes and relevant documents to the Institute of Armenian Studies at USC back in 2018. Since then, we've been working on the collection by digitizing it, by creating rough summaries and some indexing terms. But in the coming year, we will be working to complete all of those processes and make the collection available and fully integrated into the USC Digital Library. For those who may not know, the USC Digital Library is where the Institute's archival materials live. So does Armen Aroyan's life history interview that we did part of the California history, oral history project. By doing this, we will make the collection publicly accessible, both in terms of its footage and especially through its indexing terms. What do I mean by this? Without those terms, how else would you know if a certain tape has this folk song, or if someone, or if a group visit the Central Anatolia College or not, or this or that village? Our desire is to make this collection fully integrated and it'll hopefully lead to new research in Armenian studies. But in my opinion, I think it could go a lot beyond that. Of course, the invaluable, the collection addresses a very specific post-genocide phenomenon, that of return, not of repatriation, but of the sort of spiritual tourism. Dr. Bertram has written about this and analyzed, and she's going to be speaking later about this topic. And she could speak a lot better than me. Despite the obvious importance to Armenian studies, this content in these tapes is relevant for Ottoman, for Turkish, for Kurdish, for American studies, architecture, folklore, urban development, linguistic anthropology, memory studies. There's so much that's relevant to this collection. Just imagine, what do you do with some Turkish destan or epics sung in Hajjan? Or just imagine what scholars would do, what architecture or urban sociology scholars would do when you visit the same place over and over again for about 30 years and seeing the changes of that place. Or what local Turks and Kurds, what type of memory that they have with their Armenian neighbors, and vice versa. What do Armenians remember about their Turkish or Kurdish former neighbors? Or how would you handle Eastern Turkey during years of civil war with Kurdish militants? This is something I'm just personally curious about. This is the height of the Kurdish civil war. Back in the 90s. There's probably dozens and dozens of these research topics that a researcher could engage with in or outside of Armenian studies. At the Institute, we're very grateful for Armen Aroyan for his work and that he's provided a service for Armenians to reconnect with their roots and to, of course, capture so much on his video camera that we have now within our archives. I'd like to end with a personal observation on this topic. I personally visited my father's and grandfather's village back in Yozgat, and ending up in Ani, all the way from Yozgat to Ani. This I did with my wife and I. I did not know who Armen Aroyan was back then. Maybe I had heard his name. But I've been fortunate enough to travel much of the world, but no trip has ever left a bigger impact than my visit to my father's and my grandfather's village. And not even close. There hasn't been, it's ingrained in my mind. For many decades, Armenians, the survivor generation, the children of survivors, they hadn't gone back to where they were from for many reasons. Turkey's genocidal exile, the denial, the memory of trauma, rage, and of course, an Armenian self-imposed boycott of Turkey, for all these understandable reasons, of course. However, the consequence of that was an increased distancing, or one could say a severance from our roots. A severance from culture, language, and identity in exchange for a new culture, a new language, a new identity that was mostly refashioned and recultivated in different diaspora communities and in Soviet Armenia. And at minimum, these decades of trips led by Armen Aroyan helped remind Armenians or those that went on to those trips and the families that the pilgrims were like members of. They kind of reminded Armenians where centuries of Armenian culture, language, identity, and of course, an Armenian civilization helped create the foundations of our modern day Armenian identity. And I want to thank, Armen, I want to thank you for that, because we've been severed for many decades, and it's thanks to you that you've been trying to close that gap with our own Armenian roots. So thank you.
Thank you, Manuk. And I'm sure there are many people in this room who would agree that when you go on one of these trips, it is unique and incomparable. And it strikes a chord that can't be replicated in any other way. Manuk mentioned Dr. Bertram. She is actually with us today, and I'm very, very pleased to introduce her. She is an emerita professor in the Department of Humanities at San Francisco State University. Because she received her MA in Near Eastern Studies at UC Berkeley and her PhD in Islamic Art and Architectural History at UCLA, she considers herself a historian of the visual and built world of the Middle East, with a focus on the late Ottoman Empire and the early Turkish Republic. But over time, Dr. Bertram found herself moving towards the humanities, because the questions she was asking of this world were not so much concerned with how it came to look the way it did, but rather how its places came to be emotionally understood and how these understandings changed over time, finally becoming a part of a cultural memory that did important cultural work. Her first book, Imagining the Turkish House, Collective Visions of Home, was supported by a Fulbright grant and published by the University of Texas Press in 2008, and later it was translated into Turkish. Her recent book, which she will talk about today, is A House in the Homeland, Armenian Pilgrimages to Places of Ancestral Memory. It was supported by the Institute for Historical Studies at the University of Texas at Austin, where she was resident fellow. And it was published by Stanford University Press in 2022. In 2023, it won a book award from the Middle East Studies Association, and it's currently under review for translation into Turkish. Next, she hopes it will be translated into Armenian. Welcome, Professor Bertram.
Hello, I'm Carol Bertram. Raise your hands if you can't hear me, or tell me you can't hear me. A little more, is that better? Okay, good. And if I stray, then make some sounds or something that I can hear. I'd like to thank all the sponsors who have made this event to honor Armen Aroyan, and I'd like to thank them for inviting me. And of course, my biggest thank you is to Armen. And my talk today, as well as all of my research and my book, is an homage to him. By traveling with Armen over the course of 9 years between 2007 and 2015, I experienced many profound yet always fraught layers of ongoing connection by diasporic Armenians to Western or historical Armenia because they saw it as their personal homeland and the place where their history had taken place in their village houses. I've written, as was just mentioned before, about this territory and about this time period and about these houses, but from an Ottoman and Turkish perspective that didn't consider how many of these old houses belonged to Armenians. For not only had most of these Ottoman Armenian householders died in the Ottoman genocide, their stories had been erased by the new Turkish Republic, meaning these Armenians and their descendants have been denied their place in history. So when I found that Armen had been taking diasporic Armenians to historical Armenia to find what might be left of their villages, I knew that an important alternate history of memory and the meaning of place was unfolding. In 2007, Armen welcomed me on board his buses with an endless generosity, and the trips that took place on this map became what I consider the greatest honor of my life. The result is my book, A House in the Homeland, published by Stanford in 2022. I can only give a small taste of my book here, but I'll begin with the house place, as many of the houses were gone by the time I got there, but not all of them. The most basic finding was how many pilgrims experienced their found houses or near where it had once stood as rooted in a soil that was sacred because it was made up of their family's spirits. Hastami Karatunyan told how her grandmother in present-day Armenia had begged her father to take her to Mush, to her hometown of Mush, after she died. But when her father responded that he couldn't because of the closed border between Armenia and Turkey, his mother fired back, "But what's a border for a dead person? A dead person's spirit can fly. So there is no border for a dead person." So her spirit was definitely going to return to Mush. When Aski Cascone dug up soil near where her mother's house had been in Govdon, it activated the spirits of that soil. Almost as soon as she started digging, she stood up and began to talk to her mother, who had been there, but had died years before in Rhode Island. "Okay, Ma, you got your dream. I know that you never really ever thought I'd come here, but I'm beginning to feel proud, Ma." Many pilgrims collected soil as a relic to take home. This was just one of the many types of rituals that depended for their various types of success on taking place in this spiritual landscape. In Kuri, Anush Kirkjian read a speech that he had prepared to give to his father, who had been murdered there. After invoking his spirit, he finally could introduce his father to his son, who was traveling with him. And I love him pointing out his son to his father. At Lake Van, Hachig Kazaryan played the Venetsi music he had learned from his father and grandfather. For him, this was a type of communion, for he felt that his music made his family spirits join him. When he finished, he sighed heavily and he said, "It was very emotional and gratifying. I felt like my family was watching." "Which family?" I asked him. "My family in Detroit." Detroit hammers down that these local spirits were not from a distant past. They were the spirits of the family survivors whose stories these pilgrims had lovingly carried from their hostland homes. Govdun became the place where Oski spoke to her mother. Van became the place where Hachig communed with his family spirits. The many rituals in my book made each pilgrim a part of their own homeland history in its place. And this was the fundamental reason why only this place could fulfill these pilgrims' spiritual needs. Of course, there was enormous pride when pilgrims experienced homeland as places of collective memory, such as Ani and Akhtamar. Yet it was evident that for each pilgrim, their own house, or their neighborhood, or their village, or their town was their homeland's beating heart. A vital meaning of homeland, then, was one that radiated out from the house place, each becoming a point on a net that could be thrown over historical Armenia. And two, just as with their villages, their experience of homeland was mediated by a connection to the hostland homes. Armen helped solidify this connection, what I came to refer to as the homeland's double mapping or double reverberation. For on the long rides between villages, he might grab his mic at the front of the bus and challenge his small audiences. So, who lives in Troy and Albany in New York? After pilgrims shouted from the back of the bus the names of the Armenians who they knew from there, Armen would sum it all up as Antepsis, Armenians from Gaziantep. Where do Tademsis live? Waukegan. Tomarzatsis? Racine. Armen's double mapping was a gift. It gave pilgrims solace, for it gave their lost homeland new life and made them players in keeping that life and connection alive. The sauce of this book is that I was there, but also that I've kept in touch with many pilgrims, which is why their backstories, both of rage and attachment, are so layered and so long. Actually, my traveling ethnography became a type of longue durée ethnography. And what I learned live helped me as I included the experiences of the many pilgrims I didn't travel with. My work was to create a space to record, document, and preserve the depth and rewards of these pilgrimages as a new type of soulful history of trauma, longing, and attempted repair, a generational history of Western Armenia that might otherwise be lost. Their process was digging. Mine was watching and interpreting and presenting my findings for them and for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. We really appreciate that. I learned a new term, double mapping, which is a very interesting concept, which maybe we are intuitively aware of that, but don't have a name for it. And I've learned that. I won't forget that. Before we go on to our next speaker, we've had various people who would have liked to have been here today, who've been on some of Armen's trips. So many wanted to join in this tribute to him. One of them couldn't be here tonight, but sent this message. It's from Dr. Anne Elizabeth Redgate, a renowned medieval historian who has traveled numerous times with Armen. Dr. Redgate is a lecturer in history at Newcastle University. Her areas of expertise are Anglo-Saxon England, Britain 800 to 1066, and early medieval Armenia. She was with Armen's group in 2013 and 2016. One of her subjects is Akdamar. Here's her message to Armen. Please pass this news on to Armen. In 2022, the publisher published my book, Royal Building Programs in 10th and 11th Century Armenia, the island city of Akdamar, published by Edwin Mellon Press in 2022. The sequel, Virtues of the Good King in 10th and 11th Century Armenia, a study of architecture, statuary, inscriptions, and family history in the church at Akdamar, also published by Edwin Mellon Press, is published this year. I received a lovely surprise. The publisher has awarded the book the D. Simon Evans Prize for its distinguished contribution to scholarship. The field trip of 2016 that we went on was really crucial for this project. Of course, I'd have done the project without the organized trip by Armen, but I wouldn't have found out a lot of what I did find out, especially for the first book. I owe Armen gratitude for his dedication. And Elizabeth adds that Armen said to her, "When you visit Akdamar, you're always happy. Are you sure you're not Armenian?" So thank you, Elizabeth, for passing on that message. And that sentiment, are you sure you're not Armenian? That applies to our next speaker, who I'm sure has heard it many times before. S. Peter Cowie is a distinguished professor of the Narakatsi Chair of Armenian Studies and director of the Center for World Languages at UCLA. His research interests include late antique and medieval Armenian intellectual history, the Armenian kingdom and state formation across the medieval Mediterranean, Muslim-Christian dialogue, and modern Armenian nationalism. The author of 5 books in the field and editor of 10, he's currently working on a monograph on the reception of Hellenic paideia in Armenia. He's a member of the Academy Ambrosiana of Milan, and he was awarded a doctorate honoris causa by the Russian Armenian University of Armenia. Last but not least, he traveled with Armen Aroyan to Western Armenia and Cilicia in 1998. Thank you, Professor Cowie, for joining us today. You have the floor.
Historian, explorer, travel guide, diplomat, choir director, and I'm very pleased that we had some footage of that, choir director, bibliophile extraordinaire. Armen is many things to many people. As someone who has come to know Armen in at least some of these above capacities, it is an extreme pleasure to be part of today's celebration. My first serious exposure to Armen's organizational and people skills occurred a quarter of a century ago, as you've already seen, when I joined one of his groups to Western Armenia and saw firsthand how he initiated neophytes into that experience. Vacation, adventure, pilgrimage, visit down memory lane. Our expectations were diverse. Some already primed with vivid impressions, others with none. Armen skillfully calibrated the program to ensure something for everyone. And 2.5 decades later, the memories are well nigh indelible. We were a motley crew, as has already been indicated. An archbishop, a well-known photographer, Hawk Kacherian, who very kindly sent me some of his slides from our visit to illustrate this talk, a few academics, a number of notables, a range of wonderful families, and interesting individuals. Armen created such a congenial atmosphere that we melded into a team with a real esprit de corps and a sense of common purpose. Guiding 4 or more groups a year had perfected Armen's routine, orchestrating the itinerary, transport, accommodation, access to sites, and above all, timing. I think we probably created headaches for him through our enthusiasm to pack as much as possible into every day, not willing to settle in at our overnight stop until it was already very late. For the scholars and history buffs in particular, Armen's itinerary offered a visual feast. Our bus, a time capsule, transporting us day by day back to our Sassanid times in numerous Bagaran on the Euphrates, where St. Gregory baptized King Turdat III, or in Tordan at the Arshaguni necropolis, where the king is buried. It's one thing to be acquainted with the literary record, quite another to encounter the phenomena for yourself, with your own eyes, in their natural setting. If we fast forward, the same is true of the begratted splendor of Ani. Entering the city by Simbat II's towering walls, only to marvel at its impregnable eminence when you see the sheer drop below you on either side. This is rivaled in Vaspuragan by Arjuni's sumptuous Powhatan church of Akhtamar. The sculptures still amaze the viewer, as of course King Gagig I intended they should. Likewise, the royal foundation of Varakavank competes with Jerusalem and Byzantium in its divine apparition of the Holy Cross. Not to mention the fortresses of Cilicia and Ayas, the vast harbour, the Armenian state's economic powerhouse over the 13th and 14th centuries, where you could visualize still the hustle and bustle as luxury goods from China and Central Asia were loaded onto ships for markets in Western Europe. Armen also ensured we saw Meher's Door, the Urartian shrine that features in the epic Daredevils of Sassoon. Similarly, in Kayseri, I was struck by the vast internal space and opulent gilded woodwork in the main church you see here of St. Gregory, a silent tribute to the acme of their artisans' commercial success in the 17th and 18th centuries. Meanwhile, the levelling of the Armenian quarters in Van, as we see here, and in Kharpert, spoke volumes about the vibrant communities they had brought to life, while the local guide in Mush pointed out the rows of houses said to have been built with, quote-unquote, Armenian gold. Equally importantly, Armen introduced us to the regional terrain, Cilicia's hill country, pierced by the Cilician Gates, the hydrology of the area, bisected by rivers like the Arazani and the Arax, not to mention the mighty Tigris seen here at the Granagerd and the Euphrates, that underscore the diverse character of the Armenian plateau. Its western swathe dominated by water, its eastern sector by stone. Nor should we forget the natural wonder of Bitlis's gorgeous microclimate. Its frequent rainstorms engulfed our bus too, as it edged its way up, clinging to the narrow, winding road. The ascent, though, was worth it, as at the top it opened up onto a beautiful double rainbow. One of Armen's attractive qualities as a guide is his willingness to accommodate special requests, as has already been indicated. especially to visit areas linked to participants' ancestry. One such high point occurred in Palu, where one of the group found her grandfather's house. The current inhabitants invited her inside and offered the group tea and water, welcome hospitality under the hot sun. Armen himself is a true explorer who would spend a great deal of time researching the sites a tour would visit, and was passionate about continually expanding his repertoire, as was already mentioned by Stephen Sims. In our case, his curiosity led us to Mishor Sultan Sut Garabed, the famous pilgrimage center in Mush, which we see here. The significance of the event was marked by a Turkish military escort and the requiem service Archbishop Mesrop conducted there that included Kader of a local Kurdish boy singing was broadcast that same evening on Turkish television. The other was the monastery of Avakvank, also indicated in advance, near Yersinga, which required 1.5 hours, not 3 hours, 1.5 each way of a trek from the main road. Nothing our fiercely intrepid group couldn't take in its stride. Returning a little worse for wear, but enormously exhilarated, we offered the Turkish soldiers a token of our appreciation for their assistance, supporting the elderly and the infirm along the path. For their part, they courteously declined. It was all in a day's work. For all that the area is an open-air museum, it would be wrong to imply that the trip was only concerned with the past. The present manifested itself all around in ways predictable and not. A rug seller in Istanbul approached us when he heard us speaking Armenian, introduced himself as coming from the hinterlands, and invited us for coffee into his store. Meanwhile, at breakfast in Yersinga, a young waiter casually mentioned that his late uncle was Armenian. Most surprisingly, one of the soldiers on guard at Ani, this is 1998, so it was still at that point a military zone, drew me towards the window on the Mosque of Manuche, and pointing across the ravine, as you can see here, to the Armenian Republic, he shouted, "Ermenistan!" Continuing animatedly in Turkish, he stressed that Armenians are good people. I concluded that he was probably an Armenian on military service. Armen the diplomat established a warm rapport with a number of people to facilitate various aspects of the trip. We've already mentioned, of course, the involvement of Stephen Sims. The Kurdish driver Jamil and his son accompanied us throughout, while Ayfer, a Turkish journalist and food critic, joined us for part of the way. I think it was thanks to her that we stayed at the hotel in Lake Hazır, site of the Pahlavuni capital of Dzofk, where I recall an excellent spread for breakfast and a variety of fresh and dried fruits, yogurt, and honey. However, the setting with which I'd like to conclude, which so powerfully sums up our whole experience with Armen and our introduction to the region in its ancient and contemporary reality, is the golden memory of our convivial gathering in the upper room of the restaurant at Gevash, sampling tarech, the salt fish I had learned from the historian Giragos Gansagetsi was a staple of the local commerce for centuries. Suffused in the evening glow, the day's exertions behind us, and warmed by the camaraderie of the group, past and present coalesced, and we united fully with the moment, watching the sun's slow descent on the island of Akhtavar. Moments like these, though fleeting, live on, and when savoured, help give meaning to this wider adventure we have embarked upon, called life. Emulation is the highest form of flattery. The film of our trip made its way to the Armenian Republic and was shown there so frequently that viewers could repeat it by heart. This has since given rise to new initiatives approaching the area from the east, but they are young and commercial and have a lot to learn from a pro like Armen. Armen, we thank you for all the insight, passion, and love you have invested in your journey, and those fortunate to have been fellow travelers along the way. Know that this is reciprocated not only by them, but by all those who have been touched by it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Cowie. That was a very evocative presentation, greatly appreciated. It's wonderful to see those images. And our next contributor, Ani Hobanesian Kevorkian, who you've already seen some of her work, and we've also heard mention of The Hidden Map by Stephen Sim. She is our next contributor. Ani is a filmmaker and broadcast journalist who's worked in mainstream and Armenian television for more than 30 years, sharing stories of the Armenian and human experience with international audiences. Her documentary, The Hidden Map, has earned numerous awards and aired nationally on NBC, LX, and PBS more than 2,000 times since its debut in 2021. The film has roots in journeys to the historic Armenian homeland led by Nasser, Armen Aroyan, and Ani's father, Richard Hobanesian, who with her mother, Vartiter, continued to inspire Ani's life and work. Following years of involvement with Nasser, Ani is happy to be serving on its board. And we are happy to have you today with us, Ani. Please join us.
Hello. Good afternoon, dear Armen Aroyan and friends. To boldly go where no man has gone before. That famous line of Captain Kirk reminds me of you, Armen. And of course, many had come and created and gone before in the ancestral lands. But that lifeline was severed, and you helped to rebuild it. You have called it providence, and so it must be. For what person would not only feel the need, but have the courage and act on the calling to break through the barrier and lead us to our forbidden soil? Make palpable the stories and truths of our grandparents and people, embed them in our being, and reconnect us to our roots. You did, Armen. And in the few minutes I've been given to thank you, for all of us, to share how you've strengthened my identity and motivated our life course, I'll begin with this video, which includes glimpses from journeys that my mother and my aunt, Mama Nazik, who is here, and my father and I and other family members have taken with you. Just a few of your 100.
There's a small corner in everybody's heart and everybody's mind that needs to be woken up about their ancestors, their roots. I've been coming to the homeland since 1987 and bringing groups since 1991. And it's very gratifying to see people who find their roots, to see their happiness, their joy, as they set foot on the land of their forefathers.
What do you think?
I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful.
What keeps you coming back, Armen?
Well, these are sort of Armenian monuments left behind. They're like orphans. So we come to put them on the map to tell people we do remember this. So the locals would appreciate what they have and take care of the monuments.
Armen, where are we?
We are in the monastery of Surp Karabed. The village is called Chengili, which means the belled monastery. It used to have many bells here that rang and invited the villagers to come here for pilgrimage. So you could hear the bells all over the plain of Mush.
And the people who live here now are?
They're Kurdish. It's a Kurdish sect, Zaza, mostly Zaza, and some Kermanji.
How many times have you made the journey to historic Armenia?
Oh, 70 times. And still going, so still counting.
How many people have you brought?
Close to 1,200. Some people have been on the trip 3 times, 4 times, some people 5 times, some people 6 times, 7 times, 8 times. I have many repeat pilgrims. There were 6 Armenian areas in Marash which were mixed, Armenians and Muslims. And each one has its own church, typically St. Sarkis, and then Karasum Manuk, and then Sup Asfazadzin, Sup Kevork, each one in a different district. This area is Sheker Deret. The fulfillment is to see people happy. I share their joy of discovering their roots. It gives me tremendous pleasure to be able to take them to their roots.
You've discovered yours?
Yes, that's how I started, and I wanted to make sure everybody does it. I wanted to share my findings.
We're en route to Anamur. Our entrance to Giligya. We've left the Mediterranean below and are ascending the mountains.
Oh, they call it the golden strawberry, which comes in its own cover. In Egypt they call it namusia, and namusi means like a little curtain that they use on beds to cover babies, to protect them from insects. There we go. Nice surprise inside.
Looking forward, what do we see ahead?
Well, I have to publish, I have to document what I have. I have a lot of information in videotapes, in slides, and prints. So that has to be categorized, and it takes a lot of time, and maybe it will take some help from an organization in documenting all the stuff that I have accumulated.
And in the grand scheme, what is your hope?
Yeah, maybe participate in trying to save these monuments, bringing it to the attention of world authorities, world heritage organizations, to preserve these monuments.
Thank you. At a time when nobody did things like this, what is it in you that made you say, hey, this is possible?
Well, I guess I was meant to do this. Chain of events, providential chain of events, led me to do this. And God has helped me to bring this many people all safe and sound.
Before going on, I want to remember to thank Rupen and Sharon and other people's photographs, some of which I've incorporated into what we're seeing today. I could tell 1,000 stories about our pilgrimages, informed and stirred and drove, how they did all that. Beginning that very first day of our Nasser organized trip in 2012, when leaving Istanbul en route to Giligya, you took us to the hilltop village of Bardizag near Izmit, the first of so many places where you would knowingly, purposefully lead us. We entered the Church of Bithynia High School, a 19th century American missionary school for Armenians, and how I gasped when I saw the passage still surviving faintly above the altar, even though it was painted over. Imastutian skizba, dirocha vachne. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of, rather the reverence for God. It was like finding the first piece of that magnificent, broken, scattered puzzle that was ours to reclaim and recreate. And now we were on a mission to find the rest. And Armen, you told us that you had seen tombstones nearby, but now they were gone. And I remember feeling determined to find them, as if finding a relic, even desecrated, would validate us, make us visible, make our story real again, as much as we wish it wasn't. And how I could be relieved, even happy, when finally we found the stones displaced in a nearby garden, one of them belonging to Gaza, now part of a wall. I don't know, but I was. And that was the beginning of countless discoveries, first of places, and then of people. Ultimately, more than being nowhere, I felt we are everywhere. I felt this also as I ventured with my father to find the birthplaces of all four of our grandparents, my grandparents, to unlock the doors to home. Babi Hovagim and Mami Khunguhi of Urdu gave all 8 of us grandchildren a golden childhood. And in this station wagon that had high-end license plate, Mama and Papa would take us every weekend from Los Angeles to Fresno to be with them. But their sorrow and stories of unthinkable loss also seeped into us. Beautiful, tender Mommy, full of love, could not hold back her quiet tears. And Bobby had lost his entire family and village and his toes from frostbite as he defended his homeland. He laughed with us, but screamed in his nightmares. My mother wrote this book about Zito, Babi Hovagim's village, Zito Tashti Garno, the thriving village of Zito in the plain of Garin, or Erzurum. And in the book, with Babi's help, she recreated a village map, complete with family names. With that map, Armen had decades earlier led Mama and Mama Nazik and other family members. Here we see Kanar Avedian Manjikian, Uncle Krikor Kocholosian, Seda Sarkisian Sadoyan. He had led them everywhere, and to Erzurum and to Zito. Mama Nazik is here today from Fresno. She's entered her 10th decade of life. And boy, are we blessed to have them. And if you will, I will. Mama Nazik wrote this tribute, this ode for you, Armen, and I would like to read it before she gives it to you. We have come to honor you, Sireli Armen Aroyan. You are a hero who braved into the imprisoned lands, the lands of our sainted ancestors, with the message and promise that we will be back. Thanks to you, pumped with pride, we stood on the Yergir side of our majestic Ararat and Masis and sang Med Hayrani. Thanks to you, while standing on the shores of the Arax River and anointed with its stormy waters, we sang Mayra Raxia Pero, a song lamenting the journey of the Armenian people. The glorious Ani, a city of 1,001 churches, now indignant, met us with soul-piercing, howling winds, complaining about its 1,001 wounds. Helpless, we sang Verborna. Thanks to you, I chanced walking into the waters of Zof Lake to connect with remains and spirits of my ancestors who are still waiting for the just judgment day. Thanks to you, my sister Vartited and I tried to recreate the harrowing stories of our parents Hovagim of Zito and Khunguhi of Urdu as we were standing paralyzed at the doors of their homes. Dear Armen, Our sincere, countless thanks for your countless dedicated services to keep the flame of the Armenian Ocak alive. We salute you, Nazik and Vatite. Thank you. Now it was my turn, and I remember the feeling as Papa gestured to me that this is the house. He actually told me not to enter, but I felt somehow it is ours. And as I stepped in, I was surprised to be greeted by a cow and chickens. I set a chicken free with a sense of liberation, as if I had freed a part of myself, of us. And right next to this there was an enclosed area and the rest of the ruined house in the now not thriving village of Zito.
Babi, kudunit yegadzem, Zitoch pure, kudunit mechkainadzem, melduni mechkainadzem, kidem vortunku, bzdigutunit hos ansutir, endanyok, lav dariner, tujvar dariner, hedo anhedatsav, merjogoburt hosteren, բայց դունդ կա, մենք կանք, միշտ պիտի մնանք բաբի հովագին, և պիտի հիմա քեզի ցկեմ այդ հողերը, որ մամին, քյուղեն, անիեն, սոֆինեն, դարոնեն, ամեն դեղեն հավաքեցի, պերի հոս պիտի մնա քեզի հետ, մեզի հետ, մեզի կյանք տվիր, այդ կյանքովը մենք պիտի շարունակենք։ Բաբի, ասի օրդուեն է, ասի մամին թբրոցեն և որպանոցեն է, ասի բոլոր մեր եկեղեցիներեն և անքերեն, և աս կոշիկները բաբի, եթե գրնայք ու մեկ քայլը դարնել, բայց միշտ հետս ես, քեզի լավ կհիշեմ և միշտ պիտի սիրեմ, բաբի ջան։
This physical touch fortifies against forgetting and toward doing and passing it on. And that collective truth guides me and guides my steps in life. As a journalist and an Armenian, I knew I would one day make a documentary about the Armenian experience, but I didn't know exactly how. It was on another expedition in 2013, again organized by Nasser, and again led by and plotted out so carefully by Armen, but always full of surprises. And it was on that expedition in 2013 that my answer came. We were in Kayseri, Gesaria, in what used to be a regal Armenian home, or a series of homes, when I saw a man painstakingly and precisely taking pictures of every nook and cranny. Camera in hand, as always, I asked, "Who are you?" He was a little taken aback, probably a little annoyed. Stephen Sim, he said. By now, you know Stephen, and I learned then that this lone Scottish explorer had spent 30 years uncovering and documenting what's left of the Armenian past. He joined us for a few days, and as often Armen welcomed him to do, and I didn't let him out of my sight. Here we are in Kharpets, Hulavank, today almost completely destroyed. These three people, Armen Aroyan, Stephen Sim, and my father, Richard Hovnessian, and our homeland itself, ignited what would in 2014 be a remarkable odyssey to make the documentary that was my calling. It took a lot of convincing and planning, as Steve was always solitary, or almost always solitary in his mission. And I didn't do it alone. Another outcome of these trips, I think, for many of us, was connecting or reconnecting with people who are also part of recreating our magnificent puzzle. And with two of them, Dr. Sharon Chakijian, here today, and Peter Masurlian in Washington, D.C. today, or thereabouts, we set off with Steve to uncover the hidden map. Trekking from remote mountaintops to sacred places beneath the soil, meeting truth face to face. It took 7 years for me to make the film, with the help of many, and my parents and family always at my side. Here is a 1-minute look.
The more I look, the more bones I see. I was warned against coming to not be interested in Armenian things because the Armenian past of Turkey was the forbidden past.
7,000 miles away in Los Angeles, I, an American Armenian, was living cut off from the physical touch of my roots. Now, we're off to uncover places not found on modern maps. Civilizations vanished from the face of the earth.
In the country, you're going to prison for what you're doing.
Where did the Armenians go?
You know better than me.
There could be no justification for what was done in these lands.
Follow the clues. Look beneath the surface, and you'll begin to see the hidden map. I say with great humility that for this film to be shown in film festivals and schools and British Parliament and on television around the nation, our story and the human story for millions to see and learn is perhaps one of my life's greatest fulfillments, especially because I was able to experience it with my parents. And Armen, you, brave, brilliant, humble, visionary, you're a big part of that and of me. Like this natural wonder, this miracle of creation, made with unyielding determination, sometimes stinging sacrifice and love, giving sweet nourishment, home, and life, you complete the picture. Thank you, Armen, and thank God and Providence for you. Shranagatim.
Thank you, Ani. That was beautiful. And I congratulate you for your achievement with the hidden map. I can imagine that there are some people who are watching from many countries, not only maybe a few people here who are thinking, maybe I would like to go on a field trip to Western Armenia. Is it still possible? Well, I can tell you that the need is still there, that it is still ever presently important to be an eyewitness to our relics, if you want to call them, our buildings, our presence, in Western Armenia. The need is still there. And as part of the Armenian Film Foundation and Gomidas Institute in London, partly inspired by Armen Aroyan and his trips, in 2019, we started to do trips like this to Turkey. And we are offering 2 this year. There's some pamphlets in the back if you want to take them. There's still some places available in July and September from Kars to Harpert, including Ani, Van, Akdamar, Diyarbakir, and Harpert. And you can contact the Armenian Film Foundation for more information. That's okay. Which leads us to our last contributor, someone you may have noticed in the opening video to today's event. She was part of the group hiking to that magnificent Armenian building on the horizon, Muren. Professor Christina Moranchi is Mashtots Professor of Armenian Studies in the departments of Near Eastern Civilizations and the History of Art and Architecture. She's a specialist in Armenian art and architecture and has written several books and articles on the subject, including most recently with Michael E. Stone, Armenian Manuscripts of the David and Jemima Jesselson Collection, published in 2023. And she's joining us here in a message she recorded for this special event honoring Armen Aroyan. Let's hear her message now.
Greetings, everyone. I wanted to offer a few remarks in honor of Armen Aroyan, based on my own experiences with him, traveling with him in Western Armenia. And so I'm going to be speaking today about a monument that many of you will know well, and which I came to know largely with the help of Armen. So if in case you didn't know this, the church you see is the Church of Muren, a 7th century Armenian church located in a military zone on the Turkish side of the border. So it's a restricted area. And I had long studied and admired the church from afar. I had admired it for its obviously elegant and magnificent construction, for its important historical information that the inscription bears, for its sculpture. But what I hadn't been able to do, and which was really crucial for me, was visit the church. And I tried to do this via the most official way, that is by applying for a research visa to the government of Turkey, which was, as you can see, denied. And so that left me obviously in despair. And so shortly after that, I had got an email, and this was around 2013. I received an email from Armen asking for a phone conversation, and we spoke, and it turned out he was in Istanbul and had told me that he had actually just successfully reached Muren in late May, and he had devised a way to do that, not by taking one person, but actually taking an entire group to the site with little inconvenience. And this I thought was amazing. And so he invited me to join his next group, which was headed out to Kars in late June. Armen said, if I were you, I would take the chance. And I did. And I jumped on a plane and we went. And so Armen arranged it all. About 15 or 16 of us got in a wagon and crossed a ravine, approached Muren. It was an amazing experience. 2 large tires were placed in the wagon to serve as seats. Some of us were on the floor of the wagon. We were holding on to each other as we went over boulders. It was a memorable event, to say the least. And not just important for me personally, but important in that it was the first time I got to see the church. And I'm just going to show you some images, of course, Google images here to give you a sense of the landscape, but also the position of soldiers on the hilltop, so that everything we did was in view. of them, which was terrifying, but it all turned out all right, for reasons Armen alone can explain. But it was important also because it gave me a chance to do real field work at the site, and I hadn't been able to do that. And so in the time we had, I took pictures, I studied, I knew exactly what it is I wanted to look at because, of course, I'd been studying the church from afar for years. And it was remarkable to see it in person. Since then, I've been back many times. I'll go back again this summer. But that first experience, I owe entirely to Armen, and I will always be grateful to him for giving that to me and for giving so many people a chance to see sites that are important to them, dear to their hearts, and important to Armenians as a whole. And just one final note that as we were leaving Mren, we saw it was kind of unsteady weather. You can see this is a slide from that day. There was a double rainbow as we were leaving, going back in our wagon to Kars. So Armen, I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to see Mren, and I wish you the best. Okay, thank you.
And we're almost coming to a close. We've had another message from somebody who was on one of Armen Aroyan's trips, Ellen Sarkisian Chestnut. She writes, "Dear Armen, hello and congratulations on this wonderful tribute. So well earned. The whole trip in 2009 made me feel like I was part of history, the past, the present, and the future. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to experience history and visit the city of my mother's birth, Marash, and even be close to where my father and his people were taken during the deportations. I hope you're doing well. Best wishes, Ellen Sarkisian Chestnut." So, who better to close today's presentation than Armen Aroyan himself? His multi-volume book, The Pilgrim Speaks, An Armenian Discovery of Ancestral Roots. It will be available this coming year. And as I mentioned earlier, you can see the 4 volumes in the entrance to the space here. And in those volumes, you'll see the trips chronicled in detail. But as you know, this event is about the big picture and what we can learn from it. This is what Armen wrote just this last February about his mission. "My life began in Egypt, being surrounded by a very rich history. I quickly realized that history was not merely a collection of dates and events, but is the tapestry of human experience woven with stories of triumph, struggles, and most importantly, the evolution of societies. Though I had this deep love for history, it seemed God had other plans for me. I emigrated to America, became an electrical engineer, and laid down my roots in Pasadena, California. And as time progressed, I realized an undercurrent need in Armenians to uncover their family roots. Through this awareness, I began my life journey of traveling the world over, particularly historical Armenia, to discover and document what so far was largely uncharted territory. I truly felt that I was entrusted with such a monumental responsibility. My main goals were 5-fold. 1, to discover hidden Armenians and Islamicized Armenians. 2, to discover and document extant Armenian monuments and buildings. 3, given the opportunity, to create a bridge between 2 nations. 4, to uncover lost Armenian culture and turn-of-the-century Armenian village life. And 5, to provide an opportunity for scholars to visit what they only knew on paper. Through these 5 goals, I got to experience the joy of bridging the gap between the past and the present. Only until everything was done, I realized how often I was risking my life in unsafe environments, and that my life was hanging by a thread, and that God must have been watching over me. This really proved to me I was doing what He wanted me to do. My modest wish is that my accomplishments will be a permanent and a solid legacy, and that my life's work will become a foundation stone for Armenians, for generations to come to build on it. Armen, you can probably see by this presentation today and this audience that your legacy is solid, and that you have built a foundation for generations to build on. Please, everyone, let's congratulate Armen and thank him. Would you like to say anything on it? It's on. Go ahead, yep. Yep.
I was told many times that I don't have to say anything. And it's amazing, this is one of the first Armenian gatherings that we started and ended in some time. And the Bible was working. Basically, I'd like to acknowledge the mastermind of this event, Dr. Kitabian. If we want to describe him with one word, is cool-head doctor. He really kept his cool, very polite, very persuasive, and he made messages and master naturally together. And we had a young man with a nice future coming up, Manu. He won't be Manu anymore. So he's wonderful, he's very classy, and he's the joy and happiness of his parents. His parents were very devoted Armenians, and I met first his aunt in Sivas. We went to the cemetery, and one of their cousins, I guess, uncle was guided us in Sivas to the Armenian cemetery. And then I met the rest of the family. So, Manu, do you remember that? Yes, yeah. And then we had Christine Marangi. She's very charming and never hurts anybody, very tactful, and she's a joy to have in our group. And she was very appreciative. And then we have Peter Cowie, and I like his hairdo. And he's one of the first time that he ended on time. We appreciate it. And then we have Carla. I can call eloquent and determined, cheerful conductor, let's say, of the event. She dealt very efficiently, and it was nice having her. And then Green's left. Who? Annie, of course. Annie always does this dramatically. It's always giving a strong impetus to any event. She will carry you with you, and she's very persistent. And then Carol here there's no door that's open. That's not open for Carol. She would open any door. She doesn't take the word no for an answer. If she goes this way, it doesn't hit the wall, she goes around it. Very determined. So anyway, I want to thank Stevenson. I describe him as a cat that's waiting to attack. And he does that. He goes to unusual places which nobody dares to go, but he jumps in there, and then sometimes he's watching, he's measuring his distance, and then he jumps to go to the wall. The group could not have done it, but he's very, very thorough and very quiet. And at the end of the day, he says goodnight, and the information disappears. Now it's coming back. And then I want to acknowledge Tana Raksham. I met Tana Raksham in the 60s, 70s. There he is, Tana. Thank you. In the past 15, 20 years, I was approached to make 4 films. One of the films was about the Morgenthau, and Tanya was involved in that. We had another one made by a Canadian movie maker, my son, the Rebbe Armenian. And then the third one was a fellow from New York. He did the Treasury. What was his name? On TV, appeared on TV over time. Which one? No, New York, he's from New York.
Peter Masurya?
No, before that.
Andrew Goldberg?
Yeah.
Andrew Goldberg.
Huh?
Andrew Goldberg?
Andrew Goldberg. So he was very famous in the late 80s. And he hired me to go with him because he was being Jewish, he could not have the full freedom. So we came to the border with Syria, and I said, I can't go with it. So he gave me his camera, and all the instructions, and I took the camera, went with the driver, went to the Armenian school and took pictures, and he's using those films, but even he got so. He was very, we had the fourth film was, I think Michael Aroyan, right? He used my, I was the first time I went there, he used my film. And he assigned me with the cameraman. We went to Turkey for 2 weeks, assigned by Michael Aroyan. And then he showed the film, the film that says Back to Arad. It's taken some of the footage from my church. And then we had Richard of Malaysia. He was a very, let's say, brilliant mind, everything from memory. He just had an unusual knowledge, and he never gave up until he passed away. And I think we should recognize him. That he was the, I guess, the Ishkan of the Prince of Armenian historians. You know? So can I see hands that have been with me in my trips? How many people? Okay. So I want to acknowledge Ruben. Ruben is a fantastic categorizer of films, and he's got a deep history in his work. And he has done marvelous work. You see pictures of them on there, so make sure you watch his pictures. And then I think Ruben, you went like 4 times, right? Then heavy from Boston, heavy Arcelian. You know him? He was with me 8 times. So we have people from Alabama. Anybody here from Fresno? Nazi. Thank you for coming. Nazi was an exceptional, emotional tour member, and when she saw the Lake Hazard in near Kharkiv, she couldn't help it. She just went in there swimming. So I guess who else can we mention? Maggie. Maggie, of course. Maggie is the mother of it all. She worked day and night, and a lot of pressures on her, and she manages beautifully. And then we have any batteries? I think we have batteries, so Hilabrian. You hear? This still done. Okay. This whole thing was ad-lib.
Thank you, Armen. And we are going to continue the discussion in a reception afterwards, to which you're all invited. I want to thank the Aradas Egypt Museum, Maggie Mangasari and Goshen, to our technical team, Sarah and Shirley, Arthur, Arnie, thank you very much for your time in putting together this, what I want to call a live broadcast dedicated to Armen Aroyan. Thank you so much. And we are just very grateful that we have this chance to be together today to celebrate Armen. Thank you very much, and let's go eat.